the whole, the war against terror was conducted with a high degree of professionalism by armed forces, by and large. I think there's a second element in which you might, let's say, the political process has involved lots of discussions, but I think that's where our whole political culture had in fact been driven away from a liberal democratic framework, largely because of this extraordinary constitution we've had thrust upon us, and also the party political systems, which have engendered what I would almost call as endemic hostility. And I think that has led to a process of confrontationalism. But I think rather unfortunately the one worry that we have had to face is an opposition that's dysfunctional, that hasn't actually joined with the government in addressing terrorism, which I think it should, but continue to be critical on other aspects, which I think any government should be. And instead, this particular opposition seemed to me to have done the opposite, which have tried to jump on a terrorist bandwagon, unfortunately, while actually not dealing in a principled way with other matters.
The question of liberalism is also one that is close to your heart, given the Liberal Party. But where is the Liberal Party today? And given that Chanakya, for example, was quite passionately behind a federal solution for the underlying grievances as they stand and endure even today, is the Liberal Party going to suggest that this is the way forward, or is there
no, the Liberal Party, as you know,
I suppose, where is it today, and what
well,
is
the
it
Liberal
doing?
Party has, I think, always been very consistent in its position, and as you know, a Liberal Party, right through the years, has been in the middle, which means that when the pendulum swings too much this way, it might perhaps move towards that direction, and if the pendulum goes that way, it goes back. So you have this wonderful debate between Mill, who was a very social liberal at a time when there was no social care in England, and then Spencer, only 30 years later, in Man versus the State, also liberal. I think what you mentioned about federalism is a very good example. The Liberal Party has always been in favor of devolution because it believes passionately that politics and nationhood is about individuals, and therefore the greater
You believe this as well, obviously.
absolutely,
Yeah.
the greater the power to individuals, the better. Now, for this reason, the unit of devolution was always a matter of very healthy debate within the Liberal Party, and for a very long time we believed in the district as the unit of devolution because we felt that power would be better exercised by people in a smaller unit. One of the reasons for accepting the notion of the province was very simply it had been proved, not proved, that's the wrong word, but it had been shown because of the terrible manner the Jayawardena government dealt with the district development councils, that for perhaps emotional reasons you had to go further. But when there was discussion of federalism, it was in the belief that federalism was emphatically part of promoting unity as well. Now, I think the real problem in the last few years is that we have seen the use made of, let us say, various interests in various places
In the word,
to
in the
use
Right.
federalism as a way of breaking up a country.
Right,
The obvious example, let me finish, is Kosovo. And whereas, let's say, 3 years ago I would have said, actually it doesn't matter what the name is. To me now,
It does.
what has happened with the word federalism is it is used by people to say, here is an entity that has the right of secession. Now, 30 years ago that was nonsense. The United States is a case in point. No one would have tolerated, Lincoln is a case in point, saying it's a federal country, therefore you can have independence.
If we
I
move
think
away
we now have to be careful.
If we move away from the labels and we, as you do, accept the fact that there needs to be a constitutional arrangement, settlement, process, mechanism, whatever you choose to call it, you feel that the 13th Amendment is viable in this regard?
I think it's perfectly viable if you treat it as something that needs to adapt to circumstances.
Not in its present spirit.
No, I think the spirit is fine. In fact, we've always said that the problem with the 13th Amendment is no one has even bothered to work with it.
Right.
In fact, if one of the problems is that I find this, if I might refer to CPA, I find it extraordinary that they asked us to prepare some work on devolution some years back, and we wrote an essay and no one ever bothered to publish it. I think I was told that only 2 people had bothered to deliver on time, the Hanja Tilaka and myself. No one else bothered to deliver, and then this wasn't published. And then last year they produced a collection And I said, why didn't you use our article? And they said, well, this was about federalism. I said, well, why didn't you actually look at something that looked at devolution without labels? And I had the usual, oh, we forgot. So I think there's a tendency in what are termed think tanks to actually, stir the pot and get the mixtures before. Now, if you were to look at what we've said about this issue...
But on that point, given your belief and given, I think, a large swathe of the population that wants to see an end to the grievances of the Tamil community in particular, if it is the case that the 13th Amendment is in whatever shape or form vital to this discussion as we move forward,